Secretary of State Blinken, who is basically a more boring version of Mike Pompeo. He sat down for an interview with 60 Minutes, and he gets asked about Guantanamo Bay. Let's take a look.
Case scenario. Are you prepared for a worst case scenario in Afghanistan where the US-backed government fails and the Taliban takes over?
We have to be prepared for every scenario, and there are a range of them. And we're looking at this in a very clear-eyed way. But Nora, we've been engaged in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we sometimes forget why we went there in the first place. And that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And we did. Just because our troops are coming home doesn't mean we're leaving. We're not. Our embassy's staying. The support that we're giving to Afghanistan when it comes to economic support, development, humanitarian, that remains. And not only from us, from partners and allies.
Somewhat related. Will the Biden administration close Guantanamo Bay?
We believe that it should be. That's certainly a goal, but it's something that we'll bring some focus to in the months ahead.
Are you prepared?
Okay, that was brilliant, honestly. The double speak from him. Oh, let me break it down. All right, that's my job. I shovel through shit. The first thing that comes out of her mouth, she says, "Are you concerned?" Let me play it again. Can you hear it? Are you prepared for a worst case scenario in Afghanistan? Look at the arrogance of that question. Like, who said that this occupation, this 20-year-long war, you don't think that's a worst case scenario for Afghans, for the people living under the occupation? Right? I know she's asking him, you know, it's an expression. But nonetheless, it's always like, let's ignore the victims and just focus on what U.S. policy is. U.S. policy comes first, right? And did you hear Blinken when he says, sometimes we even forget why we're there in the first place? Oh, how modest of you. How modest, right? I thought it was so important that you went there. Why have you been there for 20 years? You know? Fighting terrorism? 9/11? I want to tell you something. You know the authorization for the use of military force of 2001? This piece of toilet paper that they passed in the U.S. Congress to go to war? It doesn't even say Afghanistan or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda in it. Nothing. It just says 9/11. You know, the Congress authorizes the president to go after people who committed these acts of terrorism on 9/11 against us, or who were involved in any way. Like, it's extremely vague. It's not even 1.5 pages long. And look at the amount of death and destruction and occupation and misery that it's caused. It's their template. They've used this AOMF to go into 19 other countries, of course, illegally, right? Because just because your Congress votes for something doesn't mean the rest of the world agrees with it, right? So in any case, you know, they're saying they're going to withdraw from Afghanistan. He said that we're going to leave our embassy there. Again, doublespeak, right? Because as I've told you in the past, embassies are spy stations. They're glorified spy stations. That's what an embassy is. Not everyone working there is a spy, but that's what it is, okay? It's a glorified spy station. And I told you that what they're doing in Afghanistan, what Biden plans to do, is privatize the war. And who were the first fighting forces in Afghanistan? When you think of Afghanistan, maybe you think of how it was in Iraq, where you had, you know, the cavalry coming in, essentially, more like hordes of barbarians. You know, the British, the Americans, they all invaded at once. You had shock and awe, this massive, airstrike campaign, and then the tanks rolling in, CNN live streaming the invasion, like these bloodthirsty warmongers. Afghanistan was not exactly like that. The first major fighting force there was the CIA, right? They have a paramilitary wing in the CIA. So for the first couple of weeks and months, it's the CIA doing that. The CIA is going to stay. Absolutely, right? And you have more contractors than actual soldiers, right? Got to make some money on top of the money. But he asks him about Guantanamo Bay, right?
It was Guantanamo Bay.
We believe that it should be. That's certainly a goal, but it's something that we'll bring some focus to in the months ahead.
Are you?
Yeah, that's such a vague answer. She didn't ask you if you believe it should be closed. She said, are you going to close it? Yes or no? You remember the last guy who said he's going to close it? You remember that dude? What's his name again? Drone striker. Barack Obama. You remember that? He made it a campaign promise, right?
Second point, our legitimacy is reduced when we've got a Guantanamo that is open, when we suspend habeas corpus. Those kinds of things erode our moral claims that we are acting on behalf of broader universal principles, and that's one of the reasons why those kinds of issues are so important. We're going to lead by shutting down Guantanamo and restoring habeas corpus in this country so that we offer them an example. I think that folks made a terrific point that we have to stand for human rights, and that should be part of the trade equation. It is harder for us to do it when we have situations like Guantanamo, where we've suspended habeas corpus. To the extent that we are not being true to our values and our ideals, that sends a negative message to the world, and it gives us less leverage then when we want to deal with countries that are abusing human rights. So I think it's part and parcel with a larger program of us restoring the traditions that made this country great and made us admired around the world.
There are a number of different things that you could do, Earl.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Do you smell it? Do you smell the lies? Do you smell the deceit permeating? How many years later now? We're in 2021. This motherfucker was in 2007. Oh yeah, I'm gonna stop the war in Iraq. I'm gonna close down Guantanamo Bay. It's still open. It's still open. We don't torture people? And then he goes, wait, torturing some folks. And then when he said in his campaign in 2007, yeah, you know, I'm against mass surveillance. We can't allow pursuit of national security to, you know, put us in a position where we violate human rights and constitutional rights of Fourth Amendment. They're mild encroachments. You know, Guantanamo Bay, I mean, it's just one place, right? The CIA had several black sites, and this is just one of the most, one of their more horrific facilities. Just to give you an example, right? This is, hold on, let me zoom out. You can see that. Spencer Ackerman on Twitter. He says, this is a horror story about a man named Zain Al-Abidin Muhammad Hussein. The CIA tortured him to the point he became catatonic as a test case for its torture program. But he wasn't who they thought he was. 15 years ago, they admitted it. He's still in a cage. This guy's in Guantanamo Bay. He's not even the right dude, and they will not let him out. And then Blinken has the nerve to come and post this yesterday, right? What does he say? He says, we will always defend human rights at home and abroad. You should start defending them at home first before you deal with abroad. Yes? You should start doing them at home first, perhaps. And you know, Guantanamo Bay, I mean, this is such an atrocity of a... It's not the only one, right? I'm telling you that because you should remember that the CIA and the American government, they've been doing this for a long time and actually training others too, right? So they would go to Latin America, they would train, you know, these right-wing guerrillas in torture and the most gruesome things imaginable. So, you know, they share the knowledge, of course. But Guantanamo Bay particularly, I mean, this is something, again, born out of the war on terror. And, you know, Obama kept it, Trump kept it, Biden is going to keep it. This is just lip service. This is nonsense, what he's saying. All right? And when I spoke to Andy Worthington on my channel, so Andy Worthington, he actually worked on the Gitmo files, right? The files from Guantanamo Bay, the prisoner files. He knows the prison and the prisoners inside out. So he's you know, one of the world's foremost authorities on the topic. And I just want to play you a short clip of our interview. It's on the channel. Go ahead, just look it up. Type Andy Worthington, Richard Medhurst. And just listen to what he says here, right? You should go watch the whole thing, but I just want to play you this tiny clip over here so you can get an idea. Because I just showed you one innocent person in Guantanamo. Oh, you think it's just one person?
When they were first captured. This was the whole dubious basis of Guantanamo, that the men held there literally had no rights whatsoever as human beings. So as part of this process, they would get a panel of 3 military officers, and then they would bring the prisoner in and say, we've got allegations that you did this, 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 and this. And the prisoner would very often say, I have no idea what you're talking about. That doesn't make any sense to me. Where did you get that information from? And they would say that's classified. Now, through the lawyers and the investigations they undertook, and also through a handful of very good investigative journalists, we started to discover more of the contours of the story, that actually what purported to be the evidence at Guantanamo had quite often been concocted by fellow prisoners.
Yeah.
In other words, men who had been subjected to torture or other forms of abuse, or men who had been bribed with better living conditions, with comfort items, because there were no comfort items in general at Guantanamo. These were people who had invented stories or had corroborated stories that were fed to them by the authorities, which appeared to justify the men's imprisonment. Long preamble there, but basically what the Guantanamo files did was they put names to these people. So, you know, probably the most shocking revelations is that a persistent, unreliable informant, a Yemeni, turns up, I believe, in about 130 of these files, and is essentially saying that people were significant members of Al-Qaeda, that they were close to Osama bin Laden, all of these kind of things, repeatedly saying these over and over again. And this is the man that we know from a reporter's investigation back in 2006. During one of these combatant status review tribunals, one of the prisoners had objected so strongly, so vehemently, to an allegation that he was in Afghanistan at such and such a time and at a training camp or a guest house or whatever, that his military representative, so a military official who'd been assigned nominally to represent him in these proceedings, had gone through his file and then had cross-referenced that file with the files of other prisoners, and had found out that in every case, the allegations that were made by this man were made when the prisoners in question were not even in the country. So
right, so I definitely implore you, go watch the whole thing. But you heard the man. You heard the man. So many innocent people locked up in there. And here he's you know, Andy's just talking about one Yemeni prisoner who was basically making up stories, which the U.S. is more than happy to buy. They always do this, right? Same thing with Iraq before the invasion. They knew the evidence was bogus. They didn't care. They just wanted any person to just give them crap that would fit their narrative to go to war. So even after they have the wrong guy, they just keep them. Torturing people until they become catatonic. I mean, this is Nazi shit. That's you know, Nazi levels of evil. What is that? How is that not the first fucking thing that you do to shut that down? And then they have the nerve to lecture other countries about human rights. So, yeah, long story short, I think Mr. Blinken is full of it, just like every U.S. politician. Unfortunately. And by the way, you've heard me and others refer to Belmarsh Prison in the UK as Britain's equivalent of Guantanamo Bay. Because that's where they keep all the worst criminals, Al-Qaeda members. They'll let Al-Qaeda members out of there, but not Julian Assange, right? If you're in Al-Qaeda, you get special treatment, right? You get house arrest. You can go live at home, do your sentence there. Oh, you're a journalist who exposed Guantanamo Bay? You exposed the war in Afghanistan and Iraq? No, we can't let you out. Disgusting, honestly. Just disgusting. And when Obama was talking about habeas corpus, that's the thing with the Bush administration. They fought tooth and nail to try and stop the prisoners in Guantanamo Bay from being given any rights. Because you already have this legal question of, well, hold on, are they considered enemy combatants? Are they prisoners of war? Because then, you know, the question is, does the Geneva Convention and the Hague Convention, do they apply? I mean, it's kind of a moot point, because whether you have civilians or prisoners of war, I mean, you know, combatants that are now unarmed and in your custody, you can't torture them. It doesn't really matter what the fuck you call it. You can't torture people. But not even that. It's not just violations of international law. No. They didn't want to give them the basics of you know, right to due process, right to fair trial, habeas corpus. No, nothing. That was a legal battle that went on for years. And what does Obama do? What does his attorney general do? Shuts the case on CIA torture, right? So no one from the Bush years can ever be prosecuted for that. Oh, we found nothing wrong. Case closed. Yeah, war criminals protect each other. This is why I told you, when, you know, Biden is going to get in, he's not going to do shit to Trump. Of course not. It's a big, you know, it's one big club.